So let's transition now. So we've established, why we care about customer lifetime value, and I'd like to shift our focus a little bit to the how we drive customer lifetime value. And as I mentioned earlier in the session today, we really want to focus on three key takeaways for everyone today. I think we all sit on these webinars and you might just get flooded with a lot of information. And what I'd like to encourage us is to focus on these three key takeaways. We believe that these 3 points really help frame up the basis or the foundation for why customer success should be the driving engine for driving customer lifetime value through the customer life cycle. And so I'd love to dig into these with you guys today. So the first is optimizing the onboarding flow. So why don't you share some experience from your past as to why onboarding flow is so key to driving customer lifetime value?
It is the key for driving customer life value, because as we mentioned earlier, if you go through the customer journey, the life cycle, marketing, make the customer aware, sells the customer. And now with the onboarding, that's where the relationship, that partnership starts. So if it's not, the handoff is not correct, the handoff is cold, the customer is confused, you don't take care of the handoff between sales and onboarding, you lose the potential for the customer to renew. You lose the potential to build a strong foundation for the partnership with the customer. So onboarding is the key first step of building that partnership. Because again, customer lifetime value is not a one-time event. It is over a longer period of time, and you want it to grow as long as possible, as long as that customer is happy, as long as that customer is getting value from the solution that we sold them. And that's why onboarding is the key, basically. It's the door to that partnership. So if we mess up on that onboarding, we put ourselves and that relationship at risk. That's why I like to emphasize how important the onboarding and making sure you are giving that customer white glove treatment from the get-go. Again, you can say depending on the customer size, and I think that can be covered under segmentation depending on their ARR, but you cannot ignore the onboarding of any new customer you acquired, because you spend so much money on the acquisition. You want to make sure that you retain and you basically give them value. So onboarding also, last point on onboarding, it's time to value. So if you onboard correctly, the customer will see time to value much quicker if you have a good strategy in place and a good playbook. So,
yeah, and I agree. Yeah, and I think I love how you tie those two together, right? And how the time to value is really the thing we're measuring, right? We're driving that client towards that value realization. Right. And that's why that handoff point between sales and customer success typically can be a friction point, but it can also be an opportunity, right? Because we have to make sure that we understand that the customer's perspective on what value means to them, and that to make sure that they understand the value we're intending to deliver for the solution that they've purchased, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, that's great. So, and then talk about ownership. So as it comes to the onboarding process, who do you think, we talk about that sales to service or sales to customer success kind of handoff point. In your experience, do you see sales kind of staying in the picture? Does this become a matrix team? How might you encourage folks to think about ownership of the onboarding process?
Excellent point. And here where we experienced many customers when we evaluated their health, it's a hit and miss, and the sales, as soon as they acquire and the contract is signed, they celebrate. And what about that customer? Did we make sure they are handed off correctly to the next team, which is customer success? In short, their purpose of life is to help the customer get value from that product, help with the retention, help with the upsell, making sure the customer is always getting the best value out of the product. And so if we don't, that first step on board correctly and talk to that salesperson, we missed it. So sales are important from a point of the final point of the contract, but customer success is the point of contact with that customer for that relationship and the conversation. So to your question, I think there needs to be a proper handoff, because that customer success manager whichever we call it in your organization, is going to go back to the sales for renewal. So you don't want customer success to do the renewal and go through the contract details. That's where that relationship with that salesperson is still intact, and customer success will bring it back to the, okay, you know, you're up for renewal. Oh, you want to buy this new feature. There's more, you know, features you might need for your product. Put it back to sales. So you don't want the relationship with that salesperson to end. You want the salesperson to introduce customer success. I'm here for you for if you need any additional help or features. A good handoff is a good indication for the customer that I trust this customer. They're going to take care of me. It's not all about selling me the service or the product and the salesperson is goodbye, which unfortunately sometimes it happens more than we expect.
Sure.
And it causes a very negative impression from the get-go. And we want to avoid this at all costs.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's so important, right, to really allow the customer success team to reinforce what was established during the sales process, right? And
Exactly.
to just double down on the excitement and the expectation for that value that they've just purchased, right? So
spot on. Exactly.
Love that. Awesome. Well, there's a whole lot we could continue to dig into the onboarding. I think in general, right, I think it makes sense to understand that like every organization might be a bit different. We'll touch later on segmentation and how your onboarding process. And even when you talk about the renewals conversation, right? You have, because I hear some companies their strategy is to allow CS to own that renewal. So I think what I hear in what you're saying is just have a well-defined process. We can't just expect this to work well. We have to really identify those touch points and reduce that friction, ultimately driving towards that value realization that the clients bought into, right?
Absolutely.
So defining that ownership, defining that playbook for that onboarding and making sure that we really focus in on that. And I think that really leads us to the next point is, you know, so we have an onboarding process, and then, you know, what do we do with that, right? Like what, you know, how do we analyze that it's working well? You know, how do we react when we feel like things are going off the rails? And so I'd love to hear your ideas on the second point, the second takeaway around analyzing the usage of your product. So love to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chandler. And I think that's a key point also. Unfortunately, what we notice when we're doing health check and roadmaps, customer missed that one. Many of the SaaS organizations not focus as much on it. Yeah, we have the data, but we don't look at it. That data, the usage of your product, your solution is the key if the customer is sticking or not sticking. Because if you don't monitor it and the customer is not using your product, they're more likely to shrunk. They're going to leave. So the goal with analyzing usage is to see and figure out opportunities for helping the customer with adoption, because you want them to adopt your product. And you have all the tools to figure out what features are you using, how long are they logged in, and how often they're logged in. You know, are they using our, you know, heavy use feature? Are they using all the potential of our product? So that's where customer success monitoring comes in picture, and it's very important. You're going to figure out the customer adoption of the product. And it's important to do it early on to figure out opportunity for training, one-on-one training sessions. Here's a video clip for how to use this feature. I noticed you're trying to access this feature, you haven't. And if they're not logging in as often, it's a good conversation. Customer success should call. Anything I can help with a training, with do you need? So this is where a very important tool that's available to customer success and the organization that's trying to grow the customer lifetime value is analyzing the solution, the product usage and adoption.
Yeah.
Hands off, because if the customer is not using it, what we said, they are getting towards the shrunk, which is what we're trying to avoid in the SaaS organization. For that put some lights on it, Chandler.
Absolutely. And that really speaks to the importance of I think the partnership between customer success and product most often. And I'm sure product or solution, whatever the team, you know, is called at any given organization, right? But that's really where you identify what is the value add, or where is the value you expect them to receive, and the usage. And how that reflects in the usage of the tool, right? And I think that everyone might have a specific idea on, what that onboarding looks like, and how to really monitor that. So as a team, as a CS team, then what I hear you saying, I guess, is that it's important to really think through what does it mean to evaluate value, and how do we determine that we're having a successful onboarding and adoption process, right? And then to relentlessly monitor and track, and then
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Spot on.
That's great.
That's where the saying say relentlessly monitor and what's going on. This is where from a customer success operation, where you would come up with health scores. What is important to your business, to your solution to monitor? What is how does it look like for a good customer? So you would have a good reference. A good customer usage looks like this. They log in daily. They have all their license utilized or 90% utilized. They are using 80 or 90% of our features. So you have some reference point. So when you look at something and it's drifting in the negative direction, you can take corrective action immediately, because you don't want to wait too long and the customer gives up on you and they're not calling you and they're finding another competitor that's going to give them that hands-on experience. Sure. That's why you want to continuously monitor this usage. And the best way to summarize this is figure out what are your top metrics you want to monitor in the product usage. What is a healthy customer looks like? What is unhealthy customer looks like, so that you can prompt, you have a playbook, you have a prompt for your customer success to take action.
Yeah, and that makes me realize too, I think my last comment, I was still framing the conversation a bit in the onboarding, but you made a point earlier on that customer lifetime value is something we need to mature over the entire life cycle, right? There's no time in which we can really stop and take our foot off the gas pedal on ensuring that customer's seeing the value, right?
Absolutely. Cannot do that anymore with SaaS business. That's not an option to grow or scale at all. That's an option for losing customers.
Yeah, and I can imagine too, from a CSM perspective, these metrics could also really empower them to have conversations with the key customer contact, right, about usage, and encourage them, because at the end of the day, they've most likely made an investment in your product. And if you see usage dropping, that's an opportunity for us to highlight training opportunities and get them engaged, right?
Absolutely. That's an engaged customer is less likely to shrunk, is more likely to be more involved and getting more value of the product. Don't want to repeat the obvious, which is the cost of keeping a current customer is much less than acquiring a new customer, as we all know. So that customer success team primary goal is to keep the customer happy, satisfied, getting value from the product. Why did they buy our product? Either to save money or make money. So we need to help them reach their goals. And as you mentioned, monitoring those indicators, it will help us to engage with the customer and make sure we are there for them to succeed in our product.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think you touched on this too. And I think it's important. And we see this, in the context of, say, Salesforce, where you would want to make sure that those metrics are pulled back in so that they can trigger opportunities for different playbooks, right? Or different actions that your team can take, right? Which goes back to that. Wonderful. So so we've talked about onboarding, the optimizing your onboarding flow. We talked about relentlessly monitoring, measuring the usage. And so this brings us to our third point, which is listen to your customers. So we've talked about, we've brought them on, they've adopted the product, they've seen first time to value. We've identified what healthy looks like from the data. And so now let's talk about what it means to really listen and hear, from the customer as well.
Right. So tying this to the previous point you just had on the slide, which is the adoption and usage, figuring out utilization, because as you reached the key point, which is if you see an opportunity to interject and talk to the customer trending downwards, you're not using the product as we thought you would, as you're not using all the feature, you're not getting the most. So those and a point where we can talk to the customer proactively, because that's obviously customer success is proactive versus support is reactive, right? So that's opportunities to talk to the customer as they are using the product. So you can call it more of leading indicators. In that same umbrella of leading indicators, because lagging is after we lose them or they're buying more. Those are lagging indicators. We see, oh, they're buying more or they're buying less. So an important tool that's available to us and everybody knows about it is customer surveys. Customer surveys allows your customer to engage in a different perspective. I'm going to give you feedback about your product. I'm going to give you feedback about your service. I'm not happy about this. I'm happy about this. And that is where the power of listening to your customers due to customer lifetime value, because an engaged customer is more likely to raise that CLV, that customer lifetime value. You want them to get engaged. So listening to them via surveys is one of the easiest method. It's a tech touch, so you don't have a lot of involvement. However, the important thing I would say about surveys, you need a closed loop system on it, meaning you don't just send it and let it sit. You want to take action on it. If it's a bad survey, that's a very good point to touch with the customer. Says, how else can we improve to meet your expectation, to give you value? If it's a good survey, it's time for advocacy. Hey, Chandler, well, I see you submitted a great survey. Can we use you as a reference for another customer? So there's always value of listening to the customer through that survey channel. Again, listen to the customers is give them the opportunity, whether it's a QBR, quarterly business review, or an executive business review, whichever makes sense to your business. You don't need to do what everyone else is doing in the industry. You got to make sure that you understand your customer culture and what makes most sense to listen to them in the way they want to be communicated with you, whether it is a survey, whether it's a phone check every quarter or every month, whichever channel they prefer, you are basically doing it the way they like to, not the way you prefer. You are basically putting the customer first, following the customer advocacy to contribute to your customer lifetime value. So that's how I would listen to your customers.
That sounds great. And so we talk about, you've given us some great thoughts around kind of the vehicle of using customer surveys and the need to really close the loop and mechanisms and the kind of the need and the value in engaging with your customer. I'm curious if you have any thoughts around like the who we're interacting with, right? So if we think about our customer, and you spoke to this a bit, right? And you said, it might be an EBR or QBR, and that naturally makes us think, okay, we're talking about different audience members here. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the importance of really thinking about who we're interacting with at the client.
That's an excellent question, Chandler, and I wish there is more emphasis in this in the industry or even on when you research the web. Because historically and classically, we got used to, I know one contact of the customer and I reach out to that contact for surveys, for how we're doing. And that one contact, is not the whole organization. So right. I am a big advocate is trying to make as many contacts with the organization as possible at different roles, executives, managers, directors, influencers. The more contact you have at one customer, the better engagement and the better success the product would have, because now multiple people at the organization will use it. We say, well, why? Well, if I have one contact and that one contact finds another better opportunity and leave that organization, basically we lost that partnership relationship with the customer. Okay. So I'm big advocate is as many contacts as you can create with that customer, the better for the CLV and that partnership to continuously grow in the right direction with the multiple resources at that organization.
Yeah. And I can see how there's so much opportunity there as well, even to drive cross-sell opportunities and to enter into more latitude at an organization, right? To see how your solution can be implemented across teams. I think that's huge. Wonderful.
That's it. So if I may, Chandler, it just hit me now while I was talking about on key driver number one. Anybody remembers what it is? It was onboarding. Mm-hmm. That is the time to get them to know what is your customer life cycle strategy. Basically, to contribute to LTV, from the get-go, the onboarding is where you tell the customer, here's what we're going to be measuring, here's what we're going to do. Let them know how they're using your product. So don't leave anything for surprise. So from the onboarding, that customer lifetime value, that journey needs to be communicated with the customer. Sit early in that partnership, mapping out exactly what the customer's heading to with our solution as a product that we're providing to them. Talk about their expectation and continually remind them accurately, be ahead of the curve so that you can forecast a CLV down the road with them.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I want to also make mention too, I think we've touched on it a couple of times here, how to really think about customer lifetime value in your specific context, right? And I think that, we hear all the time about, you really start with the customer journey map and make sure that the customer is really speaking into that. And that really dictates oftentimes whether or not you end up with a high touch or a tech touch or something in between in terms of your solution, right? And I think from my experience too, I know there's a lot of buzz and has been for some time around the customer community and how that can be another vehicle for listening to your customers, right? And especially in that tech touch context, right? Where you may not necessarily have that one-on-one, but you enable those customers to interact with one another and other resources. Do you see that as well in your experience?
Yes, absolutely. I see that as a very important tool. Exactly as you mentioned, I don't have enough staff on my customer success to have that high touch customer interaction, right? So creating a community and allowing the customers to kind of see value of the product is an excellent way of allowing them to, be sticky, because you want it to be sticky to get that customer lifetime value to grow and increase. However, I highly recommend and encourage somebody from the organization, customer success team needs to be in there and monitor this dialogue, because that goes back to listening to your customer. So if somebody says something that's not accurate technically, or they're upset about something, you want them to interject immediately and says, okay, this is our community. And that's the value of having a community from the organization rather than a third party or community where you're not as involved, because now you can interject and says, oh, okay, let me take this and call you. Let me take this to support. Let me take this to the product marketing. So this way, customer will be delighted to know that, oh, I'm not just here with a bunch of other customers. The company is listening to me and they're taking action. So that's how you would make a community contribute to the customer lifetime value, by making sure that there is a playbook to help them succeed in the product and the solution.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just think, even looking back on the second takeaway about usage data, I think building out that community gives us another really rich data environment. And I know there's a lot of tools out there now, and I think we'll continue to see technology increase in terms of the sentiment analysis and the ability to really analyze that feedback in a way that we could consume and take action on that. So I can only imagine that's going to continue to be a mainstay solution in this conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great.
100%.
Love that. So we've come to the end of our 3 takeaways. So just as a reminder for everyone, the 3 key takeaways today are optimizing the onboarding flow, analyzing usage, and listening to your customer.